and welcome back to Why This Film, the podcast where we reach back into your childhood, pluck out a movie and have a chat about it. I'm Emily Slade and welcome back.
You watched it so many times before and now you're gonna watch it again. But it's been so many years since you last saw it and now you show it to your friends and they're like, What?
What am I watching?
Why this film?
And I'm joined today by Sol. Hello, Sol.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Of course, Sol is from Diminishing Returns podcast. You'll have heard me
Yeah.
guest on theirs a few times now. And he's come on over to Why This Film to share with us his chosen movie. You had several to choose from, but we went with, in the end, The Indian in the Cupboard, 1995.
Ooh.
The
Can you
IMDb
still
breakdown.
say that? Are we still allowed to say Indian
Oh,
in
are
the
we still
cupboard?
allowed to call it an Indian? Well, it's an interesting discussion to have, and I'm sure we'll go into it later. But before we dive straight in, the IMDb breakdown is Omri, a young boy growing up in Brooklyn, receives an odd variety of presents for his birthday. A wooden cabinet from his older brother, a set of antique keys from his mother, and a tiny plastic model of an Indian from his best friend Patrick. I'd say that's a fairly good and honest breakdown from IMDb there. What's your relationship with this movie?
I remember seeing it as a child.
Yeah.
I think I saw it at a friend's house initially, but it was on TV a lot, and I remember just catching it during summer holidays in the morning. It's the kind of film that would just be dumped on television to keep kids entertained, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I really, really struggled to find a film that was appropriate to pick for this podcast when you asked me. Just because I don't know, I've rewatched most films from my childhood that meant anything to me as an adult.
Yeah, I get that.
I really struggled to find one that I hadn't seen for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And then I remembered this one, which was a film I really loved as a kid.
Oh.
But I haven't seen since until now.
Yeah. It's not anymore sort of anywhere. Like, it's not on any of the streaming services in the way that sort of Labyrinth and other such movies are. It's not, like, I don't see it on DVD when I go anywhere. It's very difficult to find to watch. Like, it's a funny little one. I actually watched it at school, in primary school, and I don't recall, because we were reading the book, so then we watched the movie, because that's how education worked in the 90s.
I forgot that it was based on a book, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I actually read it. I was definitely very aware of the book as a child. Now that you've jogged my memory.
Yeah. So I think we were studying it for some reason, so then we watched the movie, and it's bizarre. I remember a really vivid... I don't remember the movie at all, other than that, like, the Indian comes to life. But just before we sat down to watch the movie, a girl turned to me, and I remember this conversation so vividly, and I think about it at least, like, once a year. It's really bizarre, but she was like, oh, this movie's really sad. Not like, oh my god, you're so sad. I mean, like, sad, like, it's really upsetting. And
Yeah.
I was just in primary school, and, like, that's the conversation that we had before watching this movie. And I remembered it when I went to sit down to watch it this time, and I was like, oh man, like, I wonder if it is going to be sad. Like, you know, we were like 11, like less than under 11 back then, and now I'm like 28 or whatever. Like, is it going to be sad? And it started, and I was like, oh my god, this is going to be an absolute slog. Oh my god. I was weeping by the end. I was crying so much. Like, so much. Like I was inconsolable.
Yeah,
and
well,
I can't even really tell you why.
My memory of the film was that it was just this childhood fantasy of, oh, what if you could make all your toys real? That'd be great. What fun. I forgot that there's this sort of undercurrent of teaching kids about death that runs throughout the film.
God, yeah, it's so rife with, like, messages and teachings and a deeper understanding of things and responsibilities, and it's so good. Like, it really gets off to a clunky start. I was like, oh my god, none of these people can act. Frank Oz is directing it, which I was so excited about. And then I was like, oh, he's not doing anything, like, special with it.
Yeah,
and then by the end, I was like, oh my goodness, this movie is just incredible.
Well, I actually think Frank Oz is an incredible director, which I base entirely on Little Shop of Horrors, his adaptation of the musical, which is a phenomenally directed film, just in terms of how much technical stuff he's wrangling with regards to the animatronics and the special effects and the fact that it's a musical and it's all shot on these elaborate sets, but then also just how sort of dynamic the camera movements are and playful and inventive the film is, and the performance, like everything about that film works like it's supposed to, and it's just magnificent. So I've been singing his praises as a director that no one really ever thinks of for a while now. Yeah. And it was interesting to go back to... I mean, I feel like one of his earlier films, but it's not, is it? He directed all sorts before this. I mean, this was post Little Shop of Horrors. Yeah. So it's kind of an odd one. I don't know if it was just... I don't know, like an opportunity to play with some other special effects that were new for the 90s that haven't aged very well, or...
Yeah, I don't know. It's a bizarre choice. I don't know if they were just like, oh, it's time... Like, I don't know if the book was particularly popular, so then they decided to make a live-action movie with it, or whether someone had like it was a passion project for someone. I don't really know the origins of how this movie came about, because it's a really bizarre one in the sense that it never spawned any sort of sequels or anything as far as I'm aware. Even though the books had sequels, it's, as I say, it's never shown anywhere. It's not shown over the holidays or anything like that. It's not like a family classic. And yet I feel like a lot of people will be like we were like, oh god, yeah, that movie, that existed. Yeah. Oh yeah, I know it somewhere. Well, that's it.
I don't know how well it did financially or anything like that, but certainly as a child at the time, it seemed like it was a popular film that my peers were into, you know. It seemed maybe not quite as big as the likes of Jumanji and Jim Carrey's catalogue, but it still seemed like a film that was quite a big part of everyone's childhood. But it has just largely vanished from the zeitgeist.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. It came out on Boxing Day in 1995, which indicates they expected it to be a big holiday hit. Yeah. But, and maybe it was. I don't know. I was surprised at how much... The cast is amazing. So the small child actors do an alright job, especially because they're sort of working alongside CGI a lot.
Yeah, I think they're all solid kid actors. But nothing particularly remarkable, but they certainly don't do anything wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, we're spoilt for child actors these days, so it's very easy to compare sort of Millie Bobby Browns and your Finn Wolfhards to your Hal Scardinos and your Rishi Butts, who neither appeared in any other movie ever again. But you've got Professor Maggie Walsh from Buffy as the mum. You've got the guy in charge of the sort of system in Cabin in the Woods as the dad. Steve
I was trying to figure out where I'd seen him. Yeah. I realised watching this must have been my my introduction to Steve Coogan without realising it.
Yes,
I was aware that.
Time.
Yeah, I was aware that he was in this film because, you know, the early days of going on the internet and looking people up on IMDb, I remember being like, oh god, Alan Partridge was in The Indian in the Cupboard. I remember that character. Yeah, weird. But yeah, it's the first time I sort of clocked, oh yeah, that was my introduction to him. And, you know, just a few years later, I was a huge fan of Steve Coogan.
Oh, wow.
Alan Partridge was quite a formative comedy that I got really into. I'm still a huge fan, but, you know, I particularly honed in on Steve Coogan and, you know, watched all his stand-up and Coogan's Run and these sort of lesser comedy vehicles he'd made.
Yeah. And so this would have been your introduction. That's crazy.
And I think he's good in this. I think he
is good in this.
He brings a nice really sort of charm to the part. There was a weird era in sort of the late 90s when Steve Coogan was just popping up as an actor and stuff in just weird roles like this. I remember he did an episode of Tales from the Crypt, if you ever watched that as well.
Cool.
I think they shot like the last season in the UK to bring the budget down or something, so a lot of British actors just ended up getting cast really bizarrely, and nice. He was one of them.
Oh, lovely. And the main kid's brother is played by Angel's son from Angel and Alison Brie's husband in Mad Men. That's what I know him as.
I didn't recognise him, but I have seen Angel. I should.
Have you seen Mad Men?
I watched the first season. I don't think
he's the
Alison
one that
Brie
sleeps
had
with Peggy, Penny, whatever his name is. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, a lot of like recognisable faces in this cast. Really good performances from all the adults, I think. Frank Oz managed to get across this feeling like it's like the house in Home Alone. It becomes your house. It was really bizarre, but by the ninth time they walked through that front door, I think movies back in those sort of the 80s and the early 90s had a real knack for doing that. Like, they would always do that trope where something fell off the wall and you'd have to put it back or whatever. And they don't do that in this movie, but I still felt really sort of attached to this home and this household more so than in a lot of movies that come out today, especially aimed at kids. I don't know, it just felt very homely. So I felt all the stakes were and were not high at the same time. So whilst you're like, the adults might find out that the Indian talks, and then you're like, you've killed a man. You've straight up killed a man. You're like 9 and you've committed manslaughter.
They should have really led into that. They should have gone full Weekend at Bernie's, and he has to like put the little man in a wheelchair with sunglasses on to get him out of the house without anyone seeing.
It was fascinating because that was really when this movie really started to like take off for me. So it sort of plods along and it gets into the sort of action very conveniently and quickly. It's like, happy birthday! Here's a cupboard. Oh, I must have a spare key around here. My grandma gave it to me. Here you go, kid. Excellent. Here's an Indian toy. It's like an antique. And then he says the line, he reminded me of you. What? Anyway, it's yours now. He sticks it in the cup. He's like, what can I put in this cupboard, Mum? How about this? And he does, and then the Indian comes to life. And that literally happens as I just said it happened. Like, it's that quick, and it's that simple. And there's no fuss. There's just, get the Indian in the cupboard. Come on. Chop, chop.
I did wonder when I was watching it if I'd missed something, but no, it doesn't sound like I did. Because, it's very jarringly... I mean, as a kid, I remember it just being a magic cupboard, so that's fine. But it does feel very brushed off really quickly. Yeah. There's no ominous drum beat and digging it up from a burial site that's being excavated, like in Jumanji or something like that.
And I don't even think the cupboard is magic. It's just that, like, the key is magic, because it was given to her by her grandma. And then you get a little, like, sentence where it's like... Oh, no, you never met my grandma, obviously, because you're my son and she was my grandma. Like, what? But, like, she would have loved you. Anyway, this is a key she gave me because she was dying and she felt bad because she hadn't left me anything. And so I saw this key on the side and was like, Grandma, this is all I've ever wanted. And so I took it. And it's just like a really sort of sad, odd story as to why she has that key. Also, because the mum just collects keys. Like, this is just one of many keys that she has in the house.
Some people do that. My cousin growing up had a whole like keychain just covered in keys, because I think he got to pretend he was a grown up or something and walk around with his keys.
That wasn't the problem. It was the way again that he was like, oh, there's no key for this cupboard. And then the mum goes, oh, you can have one of my keys. I collect them. And then just opens a drawer and tosses out a bunch of keys. I was like, okay. Like, if it was weird, isn't it? Simple, it may as well have just come with the cupboard. Like,
well, yeah, I agree, because it begs all sorts of further questions. Like, you know, if he finds a cupboard, like not a cupboard, if he finds like a full blown, you know, what's the difference between a big cupboard that you'd use and that little thing? If he finds a lock and a door on a big cupboard that, you know, you could put a mannequin in and then uses that key on it, will it turn the mannequin into a real person?
It's a very good question. Yeah, is it just the key?
Because he could,
or is it the cupboard
potentially
and the
solve. He could solve world hunger if that's the case. He could just
Yeah.
put like a drawing
Lego
of like a roast chicken in there, turn the key, and then get a roast chicken out. He could be rich. I mean, he could do this anyway with the actual cupboard. He could just put like millions of dollars Monopoly money in.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he do that? Just empty the Monopoly money in.
It's an innocent story about death. We're not here to capitalise. We're here to learn valuable life lessons.
Yeah.
It is. Bizarre.
I must say, as a kid, sorry.
No, carry on.
As a kid, I remember it being much more like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you could have a human being as a pet? Was kind of the mentality that I read the film as a kid. Whereas now it was a lot more like, oh no, he's an equal, he's a friend. But I think as a kid, it's just like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you could have like a toy and it comes to life, but it's, you know, it's your toy.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's clearly the view that Patrick, who we will come on to in great depth, who is arguably the antagonist of this movie, that's how he feels.
Yeah, I was surprised that it got into morals and ethics to the degree that it did.
I feel like
I guess it just completely went over my head. Oh yeah, completely.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel, you know how like Bridge to Terabithia, spoiler alert for Bridge to Terabithia coming up. You know, have you seen or read Bridge to Terabithia?
No, I haven't.
Oh shit!
It's unlikely at this point that I will ever watch it. It's on my radar for it. You know, it's been on my radar for a long time, but I'll probably never get around to it.
It might still be on Netflix, but I won't tell you what happens. But basically, the book was written literally because this woman experienced something in her childhood and wanted to put that in the book, and therefore the whole book, regardless of what else happens in it, all leads up to this one event, and that was the point of writing it, to sort of introduce children to this concept, etc., etc. And so maybe The Indian in the Cupboard had a similar vibe, where it was like it was written with the intent to sort of teach these lessons.
I'm just imagining, is it Bridge to Terabithia? It's like fantasy, isn't it, with goblins and trolls and things. So I'm just imagining a film where 90 minutes in, like, the trolls announce they're getting a divorce and the kid's like, no.
Well, no, it's grounded in reality. It's a kid whose imagination runs away with him. So a lot of it's in his sort of imaginary land, Terabithia, that he sort of crosses the rope bridge to, but it's just a local wood, and he makes it Terabithia, if you know what I mean. It's not like actual Narnia. Right. It's all his sort of imagination. Okay. Genuinely check out the film if you haven't. I didn't know what it was about, and I had a jolly good time watching it.
Okay.
But yeah, and I wonder if this had a similar thing, because it's so filled with these sort of so many good things. Because right near the end, I know we're jumping about all over the plot, but he brings to life an Indian, and then later on he brings to life a cowboy, and then he's just about to bring to life another Indian woman as literally, like, he does it in, like, he looks at the home.
Bride of Frankenstein, like, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Like, I've got this Indian woman plastic figurine. I'll pop her in the cupboard and then place her in the home. So when my Indian wakes up, it'll be like, oh, and ta-da, here's another accessory to go with your home. Like, and I literally wrote a note where I was like, women aren't accessories that come with a house. When you do good, because then the Indian comes up, and I'm like, and he says, what are you doing? Like, you don't know that woman doesn't have a family or a child to care for. Like, if you bring her into this reality, you don't know what you're dragging her away from. You can't just, and I was like, oh, this movie is a lot better than I was giving it credit for in terms of its messages.
Well, it's a weird, there's a weird sense that these are not just being brought to life out of nowhere. You know, they're being plucked out of another reality.
Yeah.
And I think initially, I think as a kid I sort of took it as, oh, it's a real cowboy or a real Native American from the olden days who sort of had his consciousness put in a toy, which I don't think quite adds up, because that would require Darth Vader and RoboCop to be real as well.
I had a similar thought watching it this time around. I was like, it feels like they're real people living real lives that have, as you say, have been like cursed to live in a toy.
And I sort of thought initially, oh, you can hand wave a lot of the historical inaccuracy if it's sort of like, oh, he's from like a toy universe.
Yeah.
But I don't know quite to what extent that was intentional. The fact that he can speak English felt very convenient, for example.
So when he first opens the cupboard, it is a genuinely really lovely little reveal where like the camera sort of shifts and he tilts the cupboard and you suddenly see the Indians reel and like hiding in the corner, and it's very clever and charming. And he starts talking and I went, oh nice, he doesn't speak English. And then 5 minutes later I had to go back to that note to write, oh never mind.
Yeah, at least they acknowledged it. But then he also knows what year it is with the, Gregorian calendar, and I'm not entirely sure if that rings true. And
everybody knows what brandy is.
Yeah, but then on the other side of it, when the cowboy says, oh no, sorry, not Steve Coogan, isn't it? When Steve Coogan sees him and goes, how? He sort of looks at him like, what?
Yeah.
And then repeats it back like, how? And then Steve Coogan thinks that's him just going, how? Back to him. So I like that they were so self-aware about that, but then it was almost sort of too authentic for the rest of the film to kind of quite add up. But
yeah, it's interesting, and it did pose a lot of questions that I kind of didn't need to be answered, because I was satisfied enough with the movie that I was being given. So
completely, it's magic.
I wouldn't go further and pick holes. But his reaction when he first gets turned into a real life person, the kid is just like, oh, brilliant. That's great. Like, it's so nothingy. It's not like, or anything.
Well, I don't know if that... I made the note that this truly is a kid's film, in that it speaks to children. I don't think I was getting the full extent of this film watching it now, obviously. But as a kid, the incredibly low stakes of, oh god, I've got to get my homework done sort of level stakes really feel life and death when you're a child. So the notion that a teacher is going to make them reveal the toys to him or something, and you sort of still have to abide by what the teacher says instead of being like, I'm going. I don't know, it just felt very different watching it from an adult perspective, because I don't know, it worked more as a kid, I suppose, because I really bought into all of the emotions that the child himself was going through.
Yeah, you're right in that the stakes are perfect for a child, and as an adult you're just like, this is bullshit. So for example, everything Patrick is Omri. Omri is such a bizarre name. I've never heard it before, but Patrick is Omri's best friend, and Patrick can literally suck a dick. Like, I'm so over Patrick. It's another one. He defies everything that's ever told to him. And I know it furthers the plot, what his actions, but he's just being a dick about it all the time. He's the one that insists on bringing the cowboy to life, which is fine in the end, but obviously initially it has really poor consequences. And he's told countless times by his best friend, he's like, please don't do that. And he just completely goes against him. And then he's like, ha ha ha. And Omri is so quick to forgive Patrick. I was literally sitting here watching it and I was like, fucking dump him as a friend. We're over, Patrick. You can literally go away forever now. Just consistently not helping, being a dickhead. Even when shit's really, really going down in the third act of the movie, and Omri's like, we're gonna have to stay up all night now. Maybe we can take it in shifts. And Patrick's like, oh, if you take the first shift, I'll give you £1 million. It's like, you just don't care, do you, Patrick? Omri's little heart is breaking right now, and you couldn't give less of a shit.
I would have preferred the film if he'd gone full antagonist. The classic sort of third act where your friend who's been a bit of a dick just becomes the villain outright and crosses the line.
perhaps a bit more sense, because I almost expected it, because he was just being so unreasonable all the time. And then I guess he sort of saves himself by picking up that rat that one time and chucking it out the door. Oh, speaking of that rat, so Omri's brother has a pet rat, which spends most of the movie in a little, like, hamster ball.
Yeah, walking very precariously close to the top of the stairs.
All the time.
Yeah.
And you're constantly like, oh, poor rat, oh, careful, don't roll down those stairs.
These terrible parents have never thought to, you know...
Put, like, a child gate.
Yeah, just put something in the way, or tell them don't let the rat run around at the top of the stairs where it could kill itself. Because
no one really wants the rat in the house except the brother, and yet it's there. So the rat's in Omri's room at one point, as his brother and his friend have come to inspect the little house that the Indian has made for himself, and they're like, wow, it's incredibly impressive, well done. And the rat's in the room, and he's like, why is the rat in the room? Because obviously the rat's very big to the small Indian man, and he would be in massive danger. So he's like, oh no, get this rat out of my room, which you can understand that worry. You really can. And the brothers insist on staying to look at the thing, and he insists on the rat staying. So Omri, as you do when you're 8, decides to fucking kick the rat in his ball out of his bedroom, down the stairs.
Like a football, yeah. And it bounces and goes spinning round. You watch it I thought that was going to be a really important moment in the film.
Same!
Where the rat dies, and again there's some parallels about, you know, teaching kids about death, and he realises that he's gone too far and acted in anger.
Of a pet.
And the actual fallout is that the rat spins around on the floor, and then the brother who owns the rat sort of walks out and kind of peers over the balcony and just sort of goes, yeah, it's fine, and just walks off, not bothered. Literally. It was bizarre moment.
There were no consequences whatsoever for those actions, and they were violent actions. I've taken up half a page of notes writing, holy fucking shit, what the fuck. And a lot of, like, things happen in this movie.
Is that just the 90s? Did people just not care about animal well-being at all in the 90s?
No, because we had, like, Babe, didn't we? And we had those, like, monkey adverts for tea, and... Animals were just there for our entertainment, and this was making a good point that Omri was trying, that he was an angry young man. Because I just genuinely really hope as well that it wasn't a real rat in the ball when they did it, and I can't imagine why it would have needed to have been. I can't imagine
it was. Yeah, I can't imagine it was. But
it's horrific. It genuinely is, because it, as you say, there's nothing. All it does is it then forces Omri then, like, steals the ball.
Yeah.
So the rat can't run around as much anymore. So then he steals the cupboard. But he steals the cupboard. So his brother, that is. So Omri comes home one day and he's like, where's my fucking cupboard? Because I've got this young girl and I want to make her into a real live wife. But he's taken the cupboard and he goes in, and the whole movie they've been talking about trying to get a skylight in the brother's bedroom. And he walks in, and the first thing we see is that there is now a skylight in the brother's bedroom. And I was like, oh my god, they've chopped up the cupboard and used the wood for the skylight. No, it's a kids' movie in 95. The cupboard's fine. It's just in the cupboard under the stairs. And he just wanted his rat's ball back. Like, that was that. Like...
Yeah,
I genuinely was really worried for a second. I was like, no, they've cut the cupboard up. But no, they hadn't at all. And I don't know if I was meant to think that, in which case, well done, movie.
It was a weird tangent, all of that. It just felt like, what was the point in that?
Filling time. Yeah. Again, low stakes.
Yeah.
Very simple, easygoing movie.
I did like all the licensed toys that pop up throughout the film. It's almost got a little 90s toy Roger Rabbit vibe about it. I guess Toy Story vibe about it.
Yeah.
When he puts the toys in the cupboard initially to bring a load more to life, and there's a brief bit of chaos. It's obviously Darth Vader and RoboCop, and I think it's specifically meant to be the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. But
and
even
from
dotted
Star
around.
Trek as well.
Yeah, I had
nice.
a full-on bit of nostalgia, because I saw at one point he had an action figure of Lawrence Limburger, who for whatever reason, I remember the name of. He's the only character whose name I remember from Biker Mice from Mars, which I completely forgot about until watching this film, but I was a big fan of. They were cartoon mice, anthropomorphic mice who rode motorbikes on Mars, I guess, or maybe on Earth, but they were from Mars. I don't know. There was some really odd kids cartoons in the 90s, and I couldn't name a single one of the biker mice, but I do remember the villain Lawrence Limburger, who we had an action figure of.
Oh, I see. Yeah, there were some that they cut to that I didn't. I was like, like a scary looking mob boss who's like a rat. I don't know.
I think that's the mob boss. I think that's Lawrence Limburger.
Yeah,
like a big fat man in a suit.
That's it. Yeah, I didn't get that. But that's sweet. The relationship between the Indian and the cowboy. So yeah, let's just address Native American is probably the better term.
Yeah. I mean,
so he's portrayed by an actor called Lightfoot, whose only other real credit is the Mortal Kombat movie and adaptation. And then he plays a character called Little Bear.
I am struggling to remember who he plays in adaptation, which is a film
same.
I love, and I feel like I should really remember that.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'd recognise him if I watched it again.
It's probably a very small role. But yeah. And then David Keith plays Boone, which is the cowboy. And their conversations, because they're two adults, even though they're initially warring, obviously, because blah, 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 it's really sweet and endearing. And they're in a sort of pack that the boys bring to school. They bring them to school. That's really sweet as well. When they bring them to school in this sort of pack, they walk really slowly to make sure that they're not like injuring them or jostling them about, which is really sweetly done. And we keep cutting to them just having conversations in this pack, and he learns that his wife and child died of smallpox, and he cries about it, and then they share a joke, and they pretend to bleed plastic so when the teacher gets them, and even though the movie's very short and the screen time of their relationship is even shorter, you really feel like a bond has been made, or at least I did. So then when it's late at night and they're watching TV and there's a massive thunderstorm outside, and they really insensitively put on a movie where all of these cowboys are chasing and shooting at these Indians, and it looks even more like a documentary style than like an actual fictional movie. And instead of, considering who's in the audience, they keep it on, don't give a shit. So, of course, Little Bear gets incredibly wound up and keeps sort of getting his bow and arrow out to sort of try and defend his what's clearly his people. While the cowboy is very much, like, jubilant and like, get the Apaches. They're the worst of the Redskins, as he calls them, which, again, is not
bearing
good.
in mind that these characters have probably never seen a film before in their life as well. It's like it must be like the footage of a train coming towards the camera. Scared cinema goers back in the day.
But it's a very good scene, because I have to say he's trying to defend the people, and then the Boone shoots his gun into the air, and Little Bear turns around and shoots him with his arrow and gets him, and he falls from the boy's knee onto the duvet, and I sat up and audibly gasped, and I was like frozen for like a solid 30 seconds, because I was like, he dies? Like, I believed it. They got me, and I was very sad about it. Obviously it's a kids movie in 1995, so he does not die, because they bring
it's weird actually back. in my memory of the film, they weren't able to save him, and he did die, but obviously he doesn't. So I've sort of made it worse in my.
And he has to be. That's sort of the reason they eventually send them back to wherever the fuck they came from. And the cowboy does ask a question to Omri. He asks, when we go back, do we go back to where we left off, or do we go back to the future, as it were, have events passed since we last went back? And he said he doesn't know. And at the time I was like, yes you do, because you brought Tommy the World War II medic back, Steve Coogan. But then I guess he kind of doesn't answer that question properly.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that they're just sort of like, what the fuck's going to happen to us? And he's like,
But Lightfoot went back and forth a couple of times.
Yes.
At the start. So
yeah, that's a good point, actually.
But I guess it was only a matter of maybe a minute or two between. Oh no, it wasn't it? Because it was like a whole day between.
Overnight, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting, and they were doing things like they can. And I thought maybe are they like being played with by children, and that's what their memories are, or I don't know. It's a lot of questions that are left unanswered, but you kind of don't care, which is very unlike me. But I was just like, I'll accept that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the manslaughter. Did you remember that from a child, or was it a surprise?
I think my memory was that the cowboy shot the Indian, the Native American, and he got injured, and then Steve Coogan came out and wasn't able to save him, so they were like, we're going to send you back because you're dying here, and if we send you back you won't die. And that's obviously not what happens. I just sort of remixed the film in my memory. So I suppose I was expecting some sort of big moment, but no, I didn't remember. I wasn't expecting Cowboy getting shot with an arrow through the chest in quite that way.
Yeah. And did you expect Omri to kill a man?
No.
That really shocked me. So he brings back another Indian warrior in order to get his weapon to give to Little Bear. And when he opens the cupboard and the Indians come to life, he basically is so frightened that he has a heart attack and dies. And there's a really fascinating conversation where Little Bear is like, we have to bury him. And he's like, no, can't we just send him back? And he's like, why are you afraid of death, small child? This man scares you, I sense it. And he's like, no, let's please just send him back. And he's like, all right, we'll send him back, but you have to understand the consequences of your actions. And I was like, bloody hell.
Yeah. And they sort of, they prime the audience for that as well, because earlier on he gets a deer, is it? A toy, and turns it into a little mini animal for Omri to hunt. And then he, kills it, and then sort of says a little not quite prayer for the thing about giving up its life and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's definitely a deliberate theme running through the film, basically.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It genuinely is. Like, I love it when children's movies tackle these huge subjects in such an endearing way. I think it's incredibly important, and I just love how dark it gets. Because not everything should be saccharine. In fact, nothing really should be saccharine and sweet for children. Children should be frightened and given existential questions. And so, obviously, Omri sort of agrees with Little Bear in the end, and I think they do bury the Native American chief in the back garden with a trowel. And we all go on... Because then, of course, Omri's very aware that these are people, and it's not playtime anymore.
Oh, completely. He keeps saying it when they're in school with Patrick. He keeps saying, like, please, they're people, and has a full-on
breakdown.
And then the teacher's, trying to look at them, and he's like, no, they're just plastic figures. They're not people. They're just plastic. So he definitely understands the distinction. He's makes a big thing out of it.
It's fascinating, and of course Patrick does eventually as well, but not for a fucking while. And credit to the actor, and I don't know if I was projecting onto it, but I did sense a difference from how innocent and just like naive he was at the beginning of the movie to how much he'd learned by the end of the movie. when he does go to send them back, he has a sort of little imaginary moment where he's standing in the woods with Little Bear. And what does he say? He says, when I leave you, I will take you as my nephew. And obviously they keep talking about how they're going to remember each other forever and shit like that. And that's when I started crying. And I didn't stop until the credits rolled. Did you cry at this movie, either as a child or an adult?
I don't think so.
Oh.
Certainly not this time, but I don't think I did as a kid.
Did you?
I cried at... I might have done if they'd all died and stayed dead. I cried at the snowman back as a kid. I remember that.
Yeah, that's fair. I think if you don't cry at the snowman, you're a soulless psychopath, so that's fair. Yeah, it's a lot of sort of episodic stuff happens, lesson learned kind of movie. Did you have it on VHS? Did you see it at the cinema?
No, neither. I think my friend had it on video, so I saw it at his house. In fact, I think it wasn't so much a friend as maybe like a house with a family that I would go to after school sometimes because my mum was at work or something like that. Yeah, I feel like they had it on video, and then, like I say, it was always on television. In subsequent years, and yeah.
What did you think of it this time round? Comparing it to how you felt as a child. So obviously you said how you saw that it had a lot more meaning as an adult, but it didn't affect you in the same way because the stakes were so low. Is there anything to add to that?
No. It really struck me like it really did feel like a film for children and made to be watched through the eyes of a child. But I think taking it at that level, it works, and I can still appreciate that now, even though, you know, I would, as an adult, handle the situation very differently. I'd be straight away just experimenting with what I could make real and what I could fit in there and all that sort of stuff. Because like I said before, if you put Monopoly money in there, does it turn into real money, or does it just turn into real Monopoly money, which is useless?
Would you try the opposite? Would you try and take like a human finger and see if you can turn it plastic?
Yeah, I definitely would, yeah. Maybe not with a human finger, but maybe a bit of chicken or something.
Because also, when they did talk about sending... They bury him, but when they talked about sending the chief back after he died, I was suddenly struck with the question of, so would it... Like, you're looking at these plastic figurines, and we're assuming then that they're all secretly alive, like Toy Story. But then if one of them's died in an alternate reality and then is sent back to the plastic prison, and he can't communicate with his friends anymore because he's just dead but trapped in this plastic, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, what? Like that. Wasn't there a serial killer who covered his victims' bodies in wax or something, and stood them up like mannequins, or is that Is that just a Hammer horror movie? That
it's Carry On Screaming did that. Not even Hammer. It's Carry On movie. But no,
I've definitely seen a film with a zombie movie, in fact, where the Undertaker's like develop. Oh god, what? Yeah, there's a film where the Undertaker's he's got so good at doing everyone up with makeup and making them look like they're still alive that they actually kind of come back to life a bit, but they're basically these dead bodies with plastic all over their faces that or wax rather, and then it melts off at the end and they're all...
The House of Wax? Is that not what that is?
No. Not Dead and Buried, is it? Dead and Buried. Oh, I think it is. I think it's Dead and Buried from 1981. I remember the poster. Yeah, there you go. But I definitely would experiment with the box. That'd be I'd just be there like, right, what can I do with this? Oh, cool. Like, can you make a figurine out of, you know, plasticine and then will it into
like Toy Story
life.
4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you can, that means you're
God.
creating
Life.
entire universes that they're then being pulled out of
Oh yeah.
momentarily, which basically means that you're a god, like a deity.
They do refer to the children as gods in this until the very end, where he then says
That's
there is
true,
no
yeah.
god.
Yeah. And
There
demons
is no
as well.
god here is a line from the Indian in the cupboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it was remade today, I think they would almost have to pay lip service to the fact that the child would probably want to experiment more with the cupboard itself. They also probably wouldn't use a Native American and a cowboy as the toys.
Yeah. Well, honestly, pardon me. What's the modern equivalent of a? It's like it's all space toys, isn't it? Buzz Lightyear.
Again, we're just doing Toy Story, aren't we? The Toy Story did it all.
It's all
God, I
video
don't
games
know.
now. Things with batteries in them.
Yeah, I mean, even in
Fidget
this
spinners. He
movie-
put a fidget spinner in, and it would come to life.
Even in this movie, they refer to the sort of Indian plastic figure as an antique, and they steal them off a display at school a lot of the time. So even in this movie, we're arguing that like kids don't play with this kind of shit, and all of the figurines that he has in his own collection are tie-ins with movies. It would be a tie-in with a movie, wouldn't it? It would be the Lego movie.
Yeah.
It would be.
Yeah. Or it would be like weird green soldiers. Well, that would have been the 90s. I suppose it had to be an antique figurine because
Yeah. Otherwise, you just get Small Soldiers, the movie.
that's it. They just be little green men.
Yeah.
Well, not made out of plastic, but that's the thing. Actually, if it's just like a die-cast lump of plastic, but it is like a little green army soldier, or I don't know, a figurine of a cat, but it's not been painted. It's just a lump of plastic.
Yeah.
When you put that into the cupboard, does it get like different colours, or does it stay whatever colour it is?
That's such a good point.
Is it?
It's just interesting. I'm currently literally looking over it. I've got two figurines in this room. One is Tim Roth in Reservoir Dogs, and the other is Negan in Watchmen.
Oh God,
that actor as the comedian in Watchmen. So if you put them in the cupboard, would they be mini versions of Tim Roth in Reservoir Dogs, or would they be Mr. Orange?
So could you get an action figure of a real life person?
That's what you would do. And then you would cast real Tim Roth in the movie, and then real Tim Roth would meet small Reservoir Dogs Tim Roth. That's what you do. You would make it super like meta, and you would make some point about capitalism and
but
I don't know, gun use. I don't know.
But if you did that, would real Tim Roth like disappear from reality momentarily? Or
again, that's a choice you'd have to make for your movie.
would he fall into a coma so that his consciousness could inhabit the little body? Or
maybe
are they sort of two separate entities and they don't actually? This is because I'm looking around now. I've got a Saul Goodman, Bob Odenkirk action figure on my desk, which I guess is the only thing I could use, but it's similar.
We've also got a couple of characters from One Piece, which are obviously anime characters. So would they be like a live action version of an anime? Or would they be just live action versions of characters?
I also have a Rob the Robot Nintendo peripheral from the NES, which was like a console thing, there were 2 games that were released for him, and he'd play the games with you. You'd plug him into the NES, and he'd look at the TV and recognise the shapes and move things around, blocks around for you. Now, he's not like a toy version of a real... Like, that is Rob the Robot. That's what he was made as. He's not like a plastic replica of a cartoon character. So if he went in, would he turn into a robot made out of metal and stuff? Or would he be the same, but just with sentience? Or would he...
Yeah.
This concept doesn't work, does it? They need to think it through.
Yeah, does it have to be like an action figure type, or could you put a pop vinyl in there?
I'm trying to think what he puts in, because he puts the teepee in, but that is like a lump of plastic teepee.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, they're all action figures. What we see going in there, aren't they? Or figurines? They're not
figurines. Yeah. You would have to experiment if you remade it today. You would have to do something else. It's a nice little point that he gets him like a wigwam teepee, if you will. Pops it in the cupboard, and the Indian's like, "The fuck is this? I'm gonna make myself a cool house out of wood," or whatever. Yeah. So they are trying to be as respectful as they can be to sort of the history and the understanding of how things work, and how sort of Hollywood has overtaken ideas of history, etc. And I guess that would be something, if you remade it, that you would also perhaps touch on and push. But movies are a little bit more respectful and real these days, aren't they?
Yeah.
Ish.
But then that's weird, because that means he is an authentic, realistic Native American rather than like a fictionalized version. But then if you put a space alien in there, it's not going to be it was the real sort of Darth Vader that sort of came to life in a way. Yeah, it's not like they put the T-Rex action figure in there, and then when it became real, it had feathers. It just looked like the thing from Jurassic Park.
What did because didn't Steve Coogan also play a figurine in Night at the Museum?
Oh God, probably.
Doesn't Owen Wilson, that's the one. Owen Wilson plays a cowboy, and I think Steve Coogan plays I want to say like a Roman centurion or something. And is
this one of the sequels or the first one? Because I have seen the first one years ago.
I've only seen the third one.
Oh, you're right, he is in it. I've just looked it up. Octavius in the first one.
Yeah, and he's in the third one, and they're like mini.
Yeah,
but I don't understand why, because they're already like alive in the third movie. I don't know. But how does that work? Is that a similar sort of rule? They're in a museum, so are they much more... Are they like real historical figures, or are they like from the gift shop? Like what? Someone email in and tell me.
I'm looking at the poster for Night at the Museum 3 right now, which I highly recommend people look at if they want to see some of the worst photoshopping in a big budget productions marketing. Owen Wilson and Steve Coogan are very small at the back, very awkwardly photoshopped onto the side of these steps. Owen Wilson's sort of pointing a gun at camera and going, "Wow!" And there's like a little monkey with some keys. So the monkey's presumably like a stuffed animal. There's some dinosaur bones that I can't tell if they've come to life as living bones or if they're just in the background.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Rebel Wilson.
The third one's at the British Museum.
Yeah. Oh.
So there are no dinosaur bones in the British Museum. But then, I saw this movie, and I'm very well acquainted with the British Museum, and they did go into a lot of rooms that 100% do not exist. And saw a lot of stuff that does not exist.
Is that just because they... Well... No, I was going to say, is that because they knew that Americans wouldn't know what the Natural History Museum is, but I suppose they wanted all the historical figures in there as well.
Yeah, it's all about the mummy. It's all about Rami Malek's sort of dad. I think he was in the British Museum, and the British Museum is known for its sort of mummy collection. So it does make sense in that sense. But then they do go into like they go into a room where there's like a Chinese sort of big box or something, and it's got serpents in it, and that doesn't exist. And then the knight that you see on here is like a wax figure that comes to life, and he's not real.
Haven't they got rid of the dinosaur bones at the Natural History Museum as well? Haven't they replaced the really cool bones when you go in with a whale bone skeleton or something?
Yeah. Why would
you do that?
I hope there's a reason, and they weren't just like, time for a change.
A dinosaur's way more interesting than a whale.
Yeah, you can.
I think the whale might be bigger. Yeah,
I
I remember being blown away walking into that museum as a child and looking up at that skeleton, and it was mind blowing. I was in awe of it.
It was a replica skeleton, obviously.
Oh, is it a real whale skeleton?
I don't know. Hang on.
Because maybe they were like, oh, we'll put a real thing.
We'll put a real one there.
To look at.
Oh, the blue whale reminds us of the scale of our responsibility to the planet. Why didn't the dinosaur remind you of that? They're extinct. Surely that's a big enough sort of warning sign.
Maybe like the museums operate on the same magical energy, the same magical principle as the cupboard.
The cupboard. It would be interesting because the cupboard could have been passed down, and you could get the guy that played Omri back in to play someone's like dad or granddad, and he'd be like, I used to it'd be like Narnia or Peter Pan, where he'd be like, I used to think that this happened. Or he'd be like, if he was a dad, he'd be like, I used to think that this happened when I was a kid. You go on and have similar adventures, but just remember they're all imaginary because I'm an adult now and I don't believe in that bullshit. Or if he's the granddad, then he can go back to being like, oh no, this definitely happened when I'm a kid and now it's your turn to have these adventures. Either way.
If they sort of rebooted it now, I think it would probably star Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
It would, 100% it would. Playing like a Maui warrior.
And it'd be a flat-out family comedy.
Yeah.
And the whole thing would just be about toys coming to life and sort of running rampant. Like small soldiers, I guess.
Yeah, but like worse. There'd be... Because the rat is planted as a threat in this movie, but it doesn't happen until the climax. And even then, because they were limited by what they could show in terms of CGI and the animal, it's much better because it's under the floorboards and you just hear a scuffle, and then the Indian comes out okay, and then the rat comes out, but then they catch it and chuck it out the room and it's fine. Yeah. Whereas now you would have a whole thing where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was like running from like a frog or a rat or a snake or like whatever weird... In fact, the brother would probably have like a whole menagerie of creatures and he would get stuck in there, and you know, he'd have to like run away from that, and then there'd be like a woman would be brought to life and they would hook up at the end, and like it would suck now actually if they made it.
Yeah, I can't remember the last kids film that I'm aware of that wasn't a sort of disposable comedy or, you know, animated. I'm sure there are some, but
yeah, I'd say Toy Story 4 was okay.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, like, excluding the animated stuff.
Oh, yeah.
What is there? Because I feel like nowadays kids' films have to be comedic.
Yeah. The Lego... Oh, no, that's animated. The latest two kids' movies that I recall being advertised in the cinema were The Boy That Would Be King, which was a take on King Arthur.
Oh, yeah.
And The House with the Clock in Its Walls, which was Kate Blanchett and Jack Black.
Yeah, the House with the Clock in Its Walls I didn't see. Yeah, but I think it's meant to be horror for kids, although I do think it's probably got some comedy in there as well, because it was Eli Roth who directed it, if you know who that is.
Oh, nice.
Very odd
career
move. I think he's probably had a kid of his own or something.
Oh,
would be my guess.
that is always what's happened. I want my kids to be able to see me in something.
Yeah. But the kid who would be king, yeah, I suppose that was that kind of classic harking back to Amblin adventure sort of stuff. But
In a
it's
way.
not. But then I don't know. It still has a lot more humour in it than this film.
Yeah, and just things like they wouldn't be allowed to fully go back and not have technology. Like, they all still have their iPhones and shit. Like, I used to read the Beano, and then the minute I the Terrible got, like, a mobile phone, I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm just done.
Yeah.
It just halts any storytelling.
Yeah. It's annoying, though, isn't it? Because nowadays we have to have a line of dialogue at the start of every film that explains why they haven't got a phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, either there's no signal, or they've run out of battery, or a sibling's grabbed it and thrown it out the car.
Literally. I don't know if you watched the BBC Wurzel Gummidge that Mackenzie Crook did over Christmas.
No.
They were lovely. They were really lovely. But yeah, at the beginning, he like loses his phone, and then Wurzel Gummidge like steps on it. So they're very much like. and then the other one's like, "Did you bring the charger?" And he's like, "No." And she's like, "Oh well." And then they have wonderful eco-friendly adventures. But like, you're right. They had to establish like, and here's why they're not just sitting playing Candy Crush and watching Netflix.
I'm trying to. I'm just looking through films I saw from 2019 to see how many address the phone situation. Midsummer, I feel like that must have said something about, there's no reception out here or something.
I think they even had
Us. I think Us just let them use the phone, didn't it? I think that's part of why I liked it.
They call the police several times in Us.
Yeah,
it's just that it's such a widespread panic that it's futile to call the police.
Yeah, but they don't reveal that until halfway through, so you're like, oh my god, how's this gonna last another hour? Amazing, like, great. Yeah, I guess it's not that big a deal, actually. None of the films I'm looking at have struggled with it, so... fair enough.
And I guess I wouldn't really call... I mean, Jurassic Park, I now think is for children because it's old, whereas I guess it wasn't.
Well, I don't know. I think it kind of is. Like, it's hard to tell because I'm reading the book at the moment. I'm a slow reader. I've been reading it for a while, but
I love the book.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. But it's very much not a kid's book. There's some horrifically disturbing death scenes in it so far. Yeah. Although two of the main characters are children, which was a curious decision on the part of Michael Crichton.
And even
but then the film feels very
there.
much... Yeah, the film feels very much like it kind of is a family thing because there are these two kids there. I don't know, it's a weird one. I think it was always meant to be for the whole family, like
it's
a Marvel movie or...
The rights for the movie got given to Spielberg whilst Michael Crichton was still writing the novel. So we wrote the novel and essentially the screenplay almost at the same time, and yet the underlying theme is pure capitalism. The reason Richard Hammond makes a theme park is because he knows he can make the most money out of it rather than selling this to science or whatever.
He specifically does a monologue about that, where he says, like, look, I could have done this for science and it's not worth as much money, so...
Money. In the movie, it's like, I would do dinosaurs, isn't it lovely? And it's very much that, and that immediately makes it more family friendly because it's like, oh, your granddad just wanted to make some dinosaurs.
But I mean, so much of the book is just like huge lists of the characters, like feeding timetables for each dinosaur and the temperatures they all have to be kept at, and it's like very data heavy novel.
And
it's really odd that
the Jeff Goldblum character comes in, he's just in to give these like deep philosophical monologues, even more so than he does in the movie.
It's like reading a Wikipedia entry on looking after an iguana or something at times.
Yeah.
But then it's weird because it's so compelling in spite of it.
Oh, I loved it. I really want to read Westworld as well.
I think I was looking this up recently because I was like, oh, you know what? This is so good. I'm going to have to read the sequel when I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I hate the movie sequel. I have faith that maybe the book will be alright. I think Westworld was written for the screen. I don't think it was a book. I think it was just written as a movie.
Oh, I thought it was written as a book by the same person.
No, Michael Crichton wrote and directed the film, but I don't think it was actually based on a book. I think he just wrote it as a movie. It was like a weird
original
attempt from
screenplay.
him. Yeah, because he directed it as well, which I don't think he did much directing, but yeah.
That's interesting.
Otherwise, I would be reading that as well. But
Yeah. Oh, boo! I just assumed it was like a book. But yeah, anything else to say about the Indian Covered?
No. We've covered the rat being mistreated. We've covered Steve Coogan. We've covered the rules of how it works, and we've covered Lawrence Limburger from Biker Mice from Mars. So that's pretty much everything I had to say.
Excellent. I think the music in this movie is really lovely. It's a lot of the reason why I was crying, to be fair, because the music just really swells at the appropriate moments in such a beautiful way.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you who composed the music, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was someone like, who you'd expect it to be. The John Williamses, the Howard Shores, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I must say, it really did feel like one of the last sort of offcuts from that classic Spielberg, Amblin Entertainment kind of family filmmaking. And I know we still get films like that nowadays, but whenever we do, it's a very conscious, postmodern attempt at replicating those sorts of films.
Yeah.
Whereas this felt very organically like it was just from that cut from that same cloth.
I've said
but it's,
this.
yeah.
I've said this about another movie this season as well, and I mean it's very obvious in this one because you get a shot of them. You get a beautiful shot of the sun rising between the two towers, and I genuinely think cinema almost had to change for children as well as adults post 9/11, and it's not allowed to be so innocent anymore, and so for just pure entertainment value. And
I think that was
argue
Shrek's fault, not 9/11. I think Shrek did it. Because how could you make a sincere film after Shrek had been farting for the grown-ups to laugh at?
Very true.
But then maybe Shrek was a direct response to 9/11. That's probably what happened.
It dumbed everything down.
I mean, Shrek was 2001, wasn't it? I mean,
It was,
but then
yeah.
it must have been in development before.
Way before.
Yeah.
Yeah, way
In fact,
before.
when did Shrek get released? I reckon Shrek is the reason. When everyone says post 9/11, I think they actually mean post Shrek, because that's the point when pop culture became cynical and self-aware.
It was June, so it was pre 9/11.
Yeah, so it's Shrek's fault.
Shrek changed cinema for the worst.
Yeah.
Well,
but
we can really just trace that back to Katzenberg, can't we?
Yeah. But then maybe 9/11 is the reason that Shrek won the Oscar over Monsters, Inc. and we went along with that for so long.
I forget that happened.
I don't know why I'm taking shots at Shrek at the minute, because I like Shrek, but that would have been one to do. I haven't watched Shrek since God knows when, since I was a kid. Yeah.
Oh wow!
I can't remember when I last saw Shrek.
Have you seen Shrek 2 recently?
I mean, not since. No, not in a while.
Oh wow! Shrek 2 is something I probably watch at least once a year.
I mean, I like both of them. I definitely prefer the first.
Oh, interesting.
And I haven't seen Shrek the Third or Shrek the goes
Ever
fourth.
after, yeah, don't.
It's the same as Blackadder, isn't it? Shrek the Third, Shrek Goes Fourth. I haven't seen them since they came out.
And
I
then they
probably
have
never
Christmas
will.
and Halloween episodes, yeah.
Yeah. Although Puss in Boots was excellent.
Yes,
So,
I would agree.
there you go.
But yeah, I'd say maybe if you've got children, it might be worth showing this to them, as it does have some really heartfelt messages, and it is just very sweet and innocent, but also quite dark in its themes. But otherwise, yeah, it's a very of its time movie that I don't think we'll be seeing again for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you say, it's just very low stakes, so it feels very... Like it's not... Like its aspirations aren't that high at the same time. Not that that's a problem, but it just feels like if you were to make something like this nowadays, it would have its mind very firmly on the franchise potential.
Oh, 100%.
Can we get a sequel out of it?
Yeah.
You know,
and you could,
right, this is going to appeal to 8-year-old boys, but is it also going to appeal to, you know, Hispanic farmers aged 45? Because it has to appeal to everyone now. Will this appeal to China?
Yeah.
Because that's going to, you know, matter. Yeah.
It would, if they do redo it, they would do it as a TV series, I imagine, like Series of Unfortunate Events, and they would include all of the books. Because there are about 5 books, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
I don't know what happens in them, because I feel like I've learned everything I need to learn.
Yeah,
but maybe
I can't...
he just keeps bringing him back. I don't know.
I can't imagine there's much scope beyond...
Unless it's just like
what we see
episodic
here.
adventures, and we all learn a thing or two, like Farthingward, like an animal dies each week, and you understand to like slow down when you're driving, and you know, in case you kill a hedgehog, and to not dig up the forest in case you kill an entire species. And
I mean, I suppose maybe it is just like, oh, I'm going to summer camp in this book. You going to come with me? Yeah, I'll come with you. And then if it's that sort of thing, then I suppose it makes sense. But.
But yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on.
That's all right. Thank you again for having me.
Of course, and it was a
been
really interesting choice, I have to say.
I think I nailed the choice making after going through about 17 potential films that it could have been, none of which seemed quite right.
No, it was good. It was interesting to go back to, as I say. Do you have anything you want to plug? Obviously, your own podcast.
Ooh, yes. So Diminishing Returns, mentioned at the start there. That's the podcast I do with Alan, who I believe has been on this show as well, and occasionally Emily, where we talk about a film, and then in theory we pitch our own takes for what the sequel should be. Although it often just descends into nonsense, but it's good. It's good. It's better than I've made it sound.
It is good. It is good. Check it out.
Thank you.
Amazing. Do you want to be found on social media?
Oh, yeah. I should tell you where to find it, shouldn't I? Our website is dimreturns.com. So if you head there, that's got everything on it, but you can just search for Diminishing Returns on the usual places like iTunes and Spotify, and look for the slightly more popular of the two shows with that name, because there's another one. And yeah, we're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I think with Dim Returns Pod on Twitter. I have no idea what our Instagram is because Alan set it up recently and I've barely interacted with it. But just search Diminishing Returns or go to dimreturns.com and there's links to everything there.
Yeah, you can find it through mine as well. I think I've insta'd a bunch of stuff lately. Of course.
Yeah, look up the show and listen to it before you go following us on Twitter and stuff, because you might hate it and then you'll be stuck following us. But if you give it a listen, you might think this is brilliant, and then you'll want to put the effort into.
Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. You can find Why This Film on Twitter. We're on Instagram at Why This Film. We're on Facebook at Why This Film Podcast. And you can always email into us at whythisfilmpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much again, Sol, for coming on.
It's all right. No problem.
I've been Emily Slade. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Why This Film. Bye!
Bye.
We watched the film and we talked about it, but now it's time to say goodbye. We'll be back again with another movie that makes you wanna ask why.